neuroscientist makes a case for the importance of studying what happens when we sleep. And so but he was also not just this or that. He is also in charge of a university in Brazil, or the Brain Institute at the Federal University in Rio Grande in Brazil, and he's PhD in animal behavior. So he's been around, and his book is The Oracle of Night. Makes a resounding, are we on generally? Okay.
Yes.
The Oracle of Night makes a resounding case for the mystery, beauty, and cognitive importance of dreams. Ribeiro marshals prodigious evidence to bolster his case that a dream is not simply fragments of memory assembled at random. As he summarizes Francis Crick's dismissal position that the dreams are meaning nothing. They're just fragments floating. But instead, it is a privileged moment for prospecting the unconscious. It's also a phenomenon, in Jung's words, prepares the dreamer for the events of the following day.
Oh.
So let's say we know of, and we've studied, and we've been really close to parallel explorations of the literal life. While the literal life still tends to dominate as a continuum, mm-hmm. When you explore other dimensions of the life, you see they're not based on the time continuum of more, which more has survival in it, but is more the exploratory dimensions. And some of those exploratory dimensions threaten the ownership or the power of the literal doer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But when you start to explore other ways where it's not only based on survival, but exploration, and your exploration as your expression helps in your survival, which means that it's not mean and challenging and competitive and fighting, but it allows you to be human.
Yes.
Which is the kind of state that you may need to explore the creative expression you're in. And that is that somehow the creative expression you're in, you have a space between yourself and the main character or something like that. And that space kind of represents what one would be trying to get to spiritually, where you see the world not only through the entity, but you make the entity more of an Uber driver. And you see it from the passenger's perspective, looking into the story. But what they had to say about him, I found very, as I was exploring some of these things myself, and that was my son Rafi visiting here, and it's his birthday today. And then a Segway is now moved from the yurt into the main room, so he's now a presence, and he has, you discover then with a Segway that he has almost a running account of the existence of humanity in his brain from every movie. He can flash back in time and say, well, did he really read the book? And I say, no, he read 2 pages that he could. So I said, it's a remarkable career that you can assume any identity in the circumstance. If there are a couple of surgeons talking in the room, he walks in in a stride and says, and when and he all of a sudden becomes a surgeon with the surgeons. Except after a week, they find out that he doesn't know what he's talking about. As Catherine would say, he doesn't have the right degree to be in the. When you have to do surgeon, the person who's impersonating the surgeon will usually faint. So that's some degree is why they had training for surgeon, because it's almost against the Bible to open up a body. In some ways, that you had to somehow be blessed or whatever. So let's say that would be something that any normal soul would shun or run away from or look the other way or avoid, because there is it's not only happening to the person, but when you see it, it's kind of happening to you perceptively. Then your brain may need to fight it off, or it explains what's happening. But the first moment of the happening doesn't only belong to the person who's experiencing it, those who are observing it. So in that, you start to see in your creative expression dimensions that are usually hidden when the world is driven to survive. So I think in the attempt when you're having something of a creative life, meaning not enslaved to something that you don't feel or see, then you find a way to navigate and survive. But it's not only bitter survival, it's creative survival. Because you can see that most of us still have had something of a privilege. It's more that we're not poor, we're broke. And broke is more of a creative act than poor. Poor has a history behind it that determines to continue. But broke has a creative way of looking at what would be a literal framework in front of them. And so that's, we were discussing the other day, the face in the crowd theory, that where the crowd is passing you by and it's uninteresting, but then someone says, "Hey, baby," from the crowd and waves at you, and all of a sudden that's an entree into a system that you would not have gone to on your own. But if someone again says, "Hey, baby," you're invited into a neighborhood, into a situation, maybe even to a family that you would try to duck if you could. All of a sudden you have to meet them. So let's say what looks like normal is in fact has its own dimensions of accident, that somehow it needed you to be naive and not part of your motive plan or something of continuity. But somehow in the creative world, it had to come to what looked like from the literal accidents. Or even Meshuggah, we'll call it a Meshuggah philosophy, where the motive isn't pre-planned. That you will say, you have an idea that there's a love out there for you, but then you feel kind of shy if you have to put signs at you window saying, "Hey, I'm looking for a boyfriend or a girl." You say, "I don't want to do that one." Although it may not be a bad way to do it. Say, "I'm looking for an intelligent boyfriend who's got nice savings and is really hip about things and that we can hang out for a while." Can one do that nowadays? Carrie,
apparently a lot of people do that. That's the dating sites seem to be what everybody's doing.
But can you do it consciously? Carrie, would you like to do, "Hey, I'm a good boyfriend and I'll ascertain what your life is about and I'll just assume that identity and hang with you for a while"?
Yeah, the dating app thing is kind of a strange world.
Well, let's say that's what you're doing anyway. Let's say we discover that what we propose to do in the future is what we've been doing most of our lives anyway. The only thing is that the discovery reveals something that was hidden in plain sight. So let's say you thought the life was literally about you.
Right.
And then you have evidence or something that sees the story from a different place. Now, if a person that you're close to is angry with you or bitter to you or hates your guts, it sends you to different places creatively.
Yeah.
Where you say, I remember seeing a John Garfield movie where he said, "I didn't murder anybody." And they said, "Who said anything about murder, Charlie?" And he said, "I read it in the paper." "That's right, I read it in the paper." So we could say, let's say, Katrin, what you would say is wishful thinking, a way of avoiding certain issues. Wouldn't you also call it brilliant thinking?
I never said wishful, Angie. I said magical thinking.
Let's say
different.
Let's say I'm a schmucky kid in the Navy, and I really like competing with the kids from the South and climbing walls and doing all that. I have to hide that I can't swim. I'm in a huge vessel, but I'm having girlfriends in Naples and in Barcelona. Okay. So it was like a movie. But then coming back, I am in the Operation Intelligence Division. They do send up planes. They do have the plans in there. And as I get in there, and how they will willfully order a bombing and stuff like that, and I'm in it. So then you experience, without knowing it, being a stranger in a strange land, or being in it but not of it. And you're not, and in fact, that's considered to be a fault. They say, "Okay, it's time to kill this family." Then you say, "I think I have to pee," or you have to think of her, or my faith doesn't allow me. So you try to lend a literal tone to what is obviously a destruction of your humanity inside, in your memory, that it's not only in the memory, that it will impact in certain circumstance because somehow you run into your human. And that is considered a failing in the world around you. But somehow, even your body is picking up that this is wrong. And it's not literally wrong because it's right for the framework around you. And obeying that, Buster, you better obey that or do 50 push-ups or this or that. You have to run the 2-mile grid with a backpack and a rifle because you asked them, he says 15 count manual, do that, huh? And I said, can you please show me what that is so I can do it? And he said, run 2 miles over there and then come back up. And then they say, okay, 17 count manual, huh? And I said, look, excuse me, sir, if you'll just show it to me one time, I think I can get it. But I don't know what the hell is 17 count or a vehicle or any of that stuff. Okay. So let's say you run into Schmucksville. But the Schmucksville is that you're kind of being trained into a kind of inhuman decision with some rah-rah element behind it. And as it's a movie, the rah-rah allows you the elements of it, but let's say when the rah-rah literalizes, that you kind of have to run towards something coming towards you, or this is what's happening, or even worse, you have to do to them what you're afraid is going to happen to you. Would you call that another expression itself called holy shit, Catherine? That you didn't know that somehow you were a holy person in a weird situation. Okay, that was normal. So you would be like Jesus in the army. Okay, what a ball buster he would be. Okay, but what a human he would be. So let's say one comes to some state somehow where, let's say, even in writing a script, or wouldn't you, or a screenplay, wouldn't you be able to then say, let's use wishful thinking in this moment rather than logical thinking? And they say, I have an idea, since I just watched an old movie with Dean Stockwell playing a kid in India called
Kipling,
Kim.
the Kipling
Kim,
story.
yeah, so it was Kim. It was so Dean Stockwell lived up here with in Taos at the end there. Oh, he's still around, isn't he? But he's 83 there, and so we saw him accidentally in this film, which was terrifically, weirdly dumb and beautiful at the same time, you know. Mm. And is that wishful thinking? That he was a white boy who had to pretend to be an Indian boy in order to survive in India because his parents died. Mm. So he can, when he needed to be a white boy, he can do that and dress up. And when he needed to be an Indian boy, he can do that. Okay. And
but that's the goal of creativity, is wishful thinking. It's like dreaming. That's different. But yes, that's the heart of creativity.
Okay. So then as we explore wishful thinking, we start to see we can't be limited in ISO. So then you have a spectrum available to you from a different perspective, from the creative's perspective, looking into the story. So then you see that it's not what would be called seeing the life from that perspective, depending on how deeply it is. Seeing it from the moment before dying, you fly over the existence where it's not literal any longer. So having the kids here and seeing their beginnings and what happened and this and that and what the story is, and then we're here at the table as if it's normal. And not only is it normal, but I remember then a segue coming here almost as if it was a little package on the front door there, left there, and then somehow living here within the framework, but still doing itself. And then all of a sudden, 20 years later, you get a shit-talking version of the baby in the couch, you know, that starts telling you what to do or how the world works and QAnon and okay, or non-QAnon, or this is really, and they've got like an accordion. They got the conspiracies. Each of the accordions, they can just play it leftist conspiracy, rightist conspiracy, normal people conspiracy, whatever. And they can play that song. And they're so hip with it. They could know it goes back to the 14th century. Columbus did this, Columbus's girlfriend did that. Okay. So you step into a world that acts like it knows what the hell it's talking about. And it would be as if you flew over time. What historical occasion would you like to visit, Catherine? Like, see, would you like to be there with Pontius Pilate and Jesus?
No.
And he says, well, what's going on here? What the hell's going on? He says, I don't know what's going on here. Okay. They say, look, these guys want me to really hurt you. Can you lighten up on your story a little bit? Could you imagine writing, just being in the room with these two guys, Jesus and Pontius Pilate? Or then you could understand then why he would go in the room and he would say, you know, I wash my hands of this. These Jewish guys have created some kind of trip between them and they want to kill the kid about something. Could it be that dumb?
I think I would opt for opening night at the Globe Theater. Shakespeare's The Tempest or King Lear, opening night, first time.
But then in Bloom's idea of Shakespeare was that he invented intelligence, or he awakened the intelligent mind, because then people were seeing their life in front of them, the things that they couldn't see about the situation they were in, they were seeing happening on stage. And so they became aware, supposedly, of a mind, a secret mind that lived in the story. So somehow the play revealed the secret mind and revealed almost a level of neurosis running through the normal story, where people plotted against each other, were afraid of each other, loved each other, hated each other, with all these things while they were going about their activities. So then Bloom revealed that what Shakespeare supposedly revealed, that you went there and you had an aha moment where you could not figure out the situation that you were in because of its literalness. But then you saw through the play or the movie that an evocative flux, a movement in flux of a similar situation that you were in. To the extent that normal life became more of a movie. And in the normal life, people started to, in the movie life, people started to vie for freedom that was not historically in the situation. A woman had a role, men had a role, the races had a role or whatever. And if they tried to exceed those roles, they were punished. So even though it was human to try to go beyond the roles laid out for you, that was punishing for the logical order of control that you ran into. And it was normal. But in retrospect, you see it wasn't normal. But somehow, so then you saw in America and in America, the America of our dream, of our schmaltz, of our beauty, and America of the literalness. And so that's why I use an illustration of being in the service as a kid in the Navy and then seeing the dream state and how beautiful it was as a goof. But then as it literalized with these determined guys who were like, okay, now get over there and you better do that. and you, okay. And then you understand why you have to, if someone says, shut up and get over there, it's time to sleep. Okay. And it's normal. And then in retrospect, you see why it needs to be normal, that someone tells you when to sleep and get in there. And somehow you're going along with it with a straight face.
I think we see it today in the care of the elderly. It's institutionalized how they live like a prison.
Look, I just saw myself at the table with 30-something-year-old people who knew what they were doing and talking and not talking. And here I say, hey, excuse me, do you think that, is there a God? Or I wonder if Jesus said, do you know, okay, who's this old guy talking at the end of the table? What is he bugging us with this? He's probably telling us not to eat bacon. Could you even get that? Could you imagine that? I would have to grab probably him in the headlock. And they say, well, they don't eat meat, but they eat bacon. Okay, and I say, I understand bacon. Okay. But we have a goofy conversation, and we've been having a goofy conversation that is taking somehow the young folks are in our life. They're still as if they're Kai's kids and we're now older kids, but they're in our life and they've come from our circumstance. And they've always been cared for by the circumstance. In fact, while they're free to do anything they wish or have the life that they wish, there's a fallback. If you get in over your head, there's always a here. But then they were asking about mortgages and futures and lives and situations, and all because of Spiro visiting here brought up that he had a Bitcoin from years ago, and that was, so we were talking Bitcoins. And then we saw a show Bitcoin, and then Kai jumped into Bitcoin. And then we found out that Derek had Bitcoins. And all these mother jumpers have Bitcoins, where even the Jesus people have Bitcoins and Botcoins, and what are they? And then I read an article that was remarkable in the New Yorker magazine about a month ago, if you can find it, about this, I think, Indian background person, but he's supposed to be the hippest Bitcoin person in the world. He advises Musk and everyone else. He just breaks all the rules. He thinks they're absurd. And his intention is to break the hold of banking systems and even nations' hold over people, but to create a kind of free people and so on. But if you can find the article, it's in the New Yorker magazine. And if you just put Bitcoin's article in New Yorker. So that was this and that. So, but I also know that for me to get it, even though I get it in every other way, I'm kind of resisting getting it because I'm hoping that someone, that they pick it up, that we gave them a birthday gift and they pick it up, and then Kai has a meeting about it, and then her son can tell you everything you need to know about it. Okay. Well, us old schmucks would never, what are you talking about? But the one thing I was getting was the chain.
Mhm.
In that film, they showed you what it was based on. And they
Yeah.
showed you a thing pretty so sweet that you kind of got it. It's in this chain and it's private and no one can get into it and it exists forever and blah, you know. And they told it in a way that you understood it in a way. But we'll see where it goes. Now, did you set up any? You said that you have a friend that is in the story pretty heavy. Kai?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah. He, yes, he's a financial writer and he invests in, so I'll talk to him about it too. He invests in several different
Oh, but
cryptocurrencies.
you said you were going to kind of set up a meet, or you would let folks know.
Next week, yeah, this week's been, I haven't had 1 second this week, but
Okay.
yes, I plan to do that.
But then, as I told you, as I walked around, I also saw that they have ATM machines that sell Bitcoin, Catherine. Should we buy some Bitcoin? Maybe I'll sell a painting and we'll buy some. You remember that painting you liked?
Which one?
The Kusama?
Oh, yes.
Why don't you research it, then we'll trade it in and I'll split it with you. We'll trade it in for Bitcoin.
I'm not into Bitcoin. But,
Well, I'm not into it either. That's why I'm keeping my space. But I'm also saying, from what they're telling me, there is a space that can be included in your sadhana. And it's not, in other words, if in fact you have sweethearts navigating it for you, who share your sentiment, like let's say, sweetheart, get your grandkid to invest in Bitcoins for you, and he'll just do. I went to invest today, he'll give you a rap song, a poetic rap song about it, and you'll give him whatever he needs.
I give my grandson one share of stock every year. for its birthday. That's what
But,
we're
but
doing.
what they're saying about stock now is that it's becoming stock.
Becoming what?
Uh, 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 Linking to the old, and that
Oh.
you have to recognize how inherently that he shouted out, "No poet." When I said rap, he said, "No poet." So you understand how hip he is. Okay. So stock is not, but Bitcoin, a cool Bitcoin that you research and a really hip one that provides for poets. And there probably is one. There probably is a poet Bitcoin that only poets who speak their same language with each other. So let's not, I'm not talking Bitcoin, I'm talking about our thing. I'm not talking about dollar bills or investment in the future, but we may have money in the bank or this in the bank, even though we're not, we understand the literalness of the system. But generally, I think that he would appreciate Poets Bitcoin. In fact, there may be, in fact, writers, poets, Bitcoin group
Oh, that would be good.
that they may trade stuff between themselves. So I always thought that the Meshuggah collection of art that came my way through where I would enter into weird worlds, but I was not in the market really, the literalness, because it's really heavy. They really cut each other's throats. But basically when you had friendship, the friendship, even though they may have ripped you off, it gave you an insight into how it works. So then in the collection that's happened over the years, I actually, the art that I collected was more ephemeral. There's a kind of art that's the ephemera, where you have a great artist, a personal letter of his or a drawing of his. But there was once an auction for a napkin where Einstein in the restaurant was writing his theories on the
E
napkin.
equals M square.
What a hip thing to have, like where Einstein was figuring out, okay.
Wow.
So
That must
then,
be worth a
so
lot.
then so I have a lot of sketches. I have a lot of, different parts. And since we knew a lot of the artists, there were a lot of personal works that were traded and kitted around and just exchanged or left here. So, but in my mind's eye, I have a running sense of values out there. And it's like what they talk about Bitcoin. It can go up one day and it can go down the next day, a painting and stuff like that. But you see, it's in flux. But I had this idea that if I pass away, everybody will look at the thing that they've taken as tchotchkes as normal and see in what world they have values. But I don't go out and do. I traded for a car with one of the paintings. I like trading. I found my way around the business world by having schmaltzy relationships with these guys where you trade them this for that. And you even let them hustle you, just so it wasn't a literal business. So then you understood it. And so I allowed schmuck number 8 I'll show you this piece here. This piece here, can you see it? Can you see that she is handcuffed by
yes.
her hair,
Oh, yeah.
by her braid? Can you see her face that is not
Yeah.
budging?
Beautiful. Yeah.
It has red in it. And the guy who examined it says it's the neck, the trachea somehow represents something deeply spiritual in the case. But it also didn't budge. But then as you show the history, there is but so the experts on it, when it was sent to them, because the guy was kind of cheating me, we found out, they wanted $36,000 for that guy.
Is it Congo or Zaire?
This is Alberta, Vancouver, the tribes that were there on the Northwest coast, they're called. And they had their own culture. And then they were settled by Presbyterians, I think. And so they started, but how they ruled their culture was through not slavery. This would be a witch, somehow one who was not going along with the culture. So this was supposedly a person who had powers that you were trying to make them confess their power. So the guys who loved the piece said they never saw But then there were other guys who were saying it can't be right because there are holes in the knees. It must have had a stand. A stand wouldn't be there with the natives. And it was found in England. And so then there were two groups of people. The people who really knew the stuff loved it. And so what is its value? Its value in literal world? 50,000 or
No idea.
$2,500.
Jeez.
Or to another prayer, it's a masterpiece, or it's a copy that was found in an English, in England. English guy owned it, but it has holes in the knees. So they point out to me, it has holes in the knees. And I said, well, the guy may have put it on a stand when he brought it to England or something like that, or changed it himself. But somehow the piece is great and not great at the same time.
Mm.
Let's say I have collections like that where it's great and not great simultaneously,
Hmm.
and I allowed these guys. So then when it was put to this guy who was going to charge us, and we found out that they bought it in auction and this and that, then we renegotiated, and I traded some other artifacts for this one that are worth much more to the guy because he can sell them. But I still like the piece so much, and I even like the story. I like the story that it's not real and it is real, and that there's this group from the East Coast and that one from the West, that I stepped into such a Meshuggah story. And
Danny, sorry, I had a phone call. Where did you say it was from? Isn't it Africa somewhere?
No, there are books on the slavery of the area around Vancouver, but Northwest Coast.
Oh,
So there's Northwest Coast Indians tribes.
yeah.
Then when they met the white settlers that came in there, the white settlers started to introduce religion to the natives, But then sometimes the natives would make their work for the white people. So they would try to make it look the way white people want it to look.
Oh.
So at that point in time, most collectors of the authenticity of it wouldn't want that piece that then was for sale. So the collectors don't buy for sale pieces. They buy pieces that were actually used in ceremonies or made with some feeling or by the individual or whatever, But once it becomes part of the dynamic of selling, then things made for sale, they felt, or the collectors felt that things made for sale were different than were made from a heartfelt.
Yeah.
So this is betwixt and between. Whether it's made for some white guy walking past with a high hat and a coat, or it was made for a ritual, ceremony or something. But when there are books on the culture, and as you examine it, they had peculiar forms of slavery. Even mother-in-laws could be enslaved and this and that, or the next village. So slavery wasn't exactly this or that. It was shut up and go along with the story seemed to be what constituted slavery, that you had to shut up. And if you didn't shut up, they would kick the crap out of you. And then it turns out that having the crap kicked out of you was signs of being human. That the crap kickers were missing certain elements of their humanity in some way. So it's weird stuff, but there are collections of it that we've been looking through. But as I say, the Bitcoinness of it is that I can walk past something and have a relative sense of its value. But the literalization of that, going out and literally doing this or doing that. So I said that about 3 weeks ago, we were all kidding around and Spiro was here. And Mary's sister called and said that this fellow was offering her to rent a space, a large space in town that stood alone by itself. And she didn't know if she was going to do that. And then in kidding around, I said, since the owner of the place is also an artist, I'll give him a painting and we'll buy 4 months there and we'll bring all our tchotchkes down there and we'll hang out. You could do some recordings from there. We can sell some antiques from there. I can have a ping pong table if you want and just make a hangout for 4 months and let that be the business. And it's in the neighborhood, so the folks in the neighborhood can drop by, say hello. So if there is any selling at all, it's not, the person isn't for sale. It's like a friendly, hey, you want to sell that chair? Sure, how much you want for it? So we'd like to do wishful thinking around business, Catherine, that you give the guy a painting, he gives you 4 months there. You've got about 20 miscreants doing their thing from yoga to.
And it's creative.
And should you say, wear a mask? Yeah, you say. And we had to, they asked for an explanation. I said, look, sir, in Mary's store, the mask is not a rule. It is a friendly between friendly civilized people. It's like saying hello, how you doing? We like civilized folks to come in the store and chit chat. So the mask is just a friendly. If you cut, so then they say, well, what is really happening? You say, if you're coming in with attitude, can you leave me out of the story? There may be more attractive places where the attitude would work out a bit better for you, but here it's a joke. Even if it's related to something real for you, it's a kind of joke that there is a predisposition that determines what's real, when a simple exploration will reveal other dimensions of the question. And as you explore the dimensions of the question, you see that you are not only you, but that you are those you care about, those you feel for, that there's a shared sentiment. So then you see, as you, that was there in homeopathy, the ability to be with what is unfolding. But immediately the mind would like to see something that it can utilize in the literal world. But the deeper you look, it shakes the premise of the door. And I think you get a chance to see almost the plays that you've been writing and the books that you've been writing, that you're in it. And so then I say, the hipness of your grandchild coming into the saying is, I'm a poet. Okay. And I say, oh, there's Catherine, there's the poet, there's the story right there. And look at the smile on her face. Then she understands everything that happened to her was just so that this kid would pop up somewhere in Washington or Oregon or wherever. I don't follow the story literally, but I do see the movie that you're in. And it is a movie that is generally hidden from us while we're in it. Very much like the acting studio premise that somehow the director is your God or your friend or sees the whole story and is bringing that out in you. And you trust it to some degree. So let's say you look at your life not as ownership of it, but you see the whole flow of it.
Yeah.
Can you see yourself as a young person saying, I hope one day to have a poet grandson and that has Indian lives and we'll have some of the spirituality in it?
I didn't even wish to have children.
Okay, so
and here I am a grandmother. Yeah.
Look at her. She's claiming she didn't plan any of this. I was just walking down the street when this Indian guy grabbed me. I also have that story. I was just walking, all of a sudden I'm in India. All of a sudden I'm in India doing mantras. I said, what the hell? And I'm naked and I lost 50 pounds or 40 pounds. And I find out 30 years later that it was the holy ganja that gave me tooth problems and kind of virus or something. Thank you, holy ganja. I appreciate it. As if I didn't know when his body's floating around me, not to put my teeth in that water. Okay. So let's say, in order to step into the situation, you had to do shmuck, 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 almost 27 levels. Yeah. And I say, let me take a bath in this place where his body's floating next to me. Okay. Excuse me, body, can I get in there? So and somehow you've naturalized the weirdest crap. And then you find 6,000 others, skinny others like you walking around wearing robes and this and that. And you find a hunchback little short sadhu says, he's going to give up on sex. And we say, why don't you first be offered and then you can give it up. You give it up before there's an offer is not such a big deal. Okay. So is this too dumb today, Derek?
No. Danny, I have to be somewhere. I have to leave, but it's great seeing you.
Thanks very much for.
Namaste. Thank
Yes,
you,
take
Danny.
care of yourself.
Bye.
Yeah,
Later.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Now, Carrie, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Did you? What did you think about that job offer of being Carrie? That your work is being Carrie. Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
I'm losing. Does it sound weird?
Well, I lost part of what you said because I lost reception.
Well,
I
I'm
heard the end
saying,
of it.
okay, but for this moment, I'm saying that look, Catherine just left us, and Catherine has a website, is it, or whatever? But it's about but it's a kind of based on the self-discovery that happens in your writing about yourself, or writing that you'll see that you'll discover a self that you kind of knew, but then you're meeting from a different place, as if it's someone else meeting you to some degree. So let's say the writing of the story has a different integrity than the living of the story. The living of the story, survival, is a big medium. The writing of the story, survival is in the way of seeing because it tends to dominate the story.
Yeah.
So, but in the writing of the story, it's the love feeling that dominated the story, not the survival sense. That people then started to cheat when they were forced into a survival relationship, their literal lives. Then they start to look for other lovers because there was something in them. So somehow, at one point historically, having other lovers was what kept the marriage alive, because you were also able to relieve yourself, but then you had to you would raise the kids, do all that. So it kept the thing going. But because it lost the thing that kept it together, it then would have crises that would happen. And to many other people, when real crisis in their own minds are, they would think that the crisis that you're in is nothing. But if you're in it, you would see that it's as deep as any other crisis when you are imprisoned in a circumstance or whatever, which was based on a feeling.
Yeah.
And then you see that fear is the dominant factor. And so if in fact you say, hey, baby, I'm not into this anymore, the whole wall crumbles down.
Mm-hmm.
And we were then having, I kind of trapped everyone into a conversation about what's your feelings about non-vaccination and vaccination within our circumstance after the scare with Janet, when maybe she got it, and then seeing it from how the world would see if she got really sick or died or something like that. We would look like such schmucks. We would have to go after Kai and grab her. They would arrest everybody, us, whatever. And they say, no, we're letting everyone come to their perception. We have a feeling of affection between the people. And so there is a looking out for each other. And they say, how much of a jerk you are. Are you kidding me? Are you? Okay. So you could see one dumb thing, and the thing that looked like a thing of beauty that somehow we came to a looking out for and covering. And so people made a decision from their own perspective, where they were, where their body was, what their responsibility was to the larger picture of the people that they care for. So basically, I thought it was a thing of beauty. But then if she got sick and really well, they said, holy shit, who will come in? They'll accuse you of this. The kids will come in, say, you did that to my... So I say the same dumb thing that seemed to be a kind of naive thing of beauty and friendship can also be a jerky, dumb thing from the literal perspective. And that was kind of revealed by the friendly doctor who visited and sat on the bench and was talking. But he has also dealt with quite a few thousand people in the emergency room, I imagine. So then he sees the argument from a different perspective. But it's also a perspective that has 10 people waiting for you. So then you see a perspective. So then the individual having it being not as a determinant, not that they have to take a stand or announce it or share, but they have a relationship to their life, their circumstance. And as long as there's no trip around, there's a shared space. So then that question arose, and after that happened, and then we were sitting there, Janet and Brenda and Mary, and said, "Oh, what's your take on it? Is it okay with you that?" So Mary said, "Yeah, it's okay. We'll manage it." But Brenda said, "Yeah, it's okay, but I'd like her to get vaccinated." Okay, you know, not that she has to get vaccinated, but I'd like her to get vaccinated. Maybe for how. So I discovered how Brenda's managing the books. She's managing this. She's managing that. So it may be easier for her to walk in the house if everyone is covered that way or something, or doesn't. So the scare of Janet having that, just what we were doing anyway, but it just brought a conversation of what we're doing. And that is the hey baby conversation. Are you still into it? And this is where it's at. And this is, but because then we were having Rafi visiting us from Colorado and this and that. So I'm watching it. Now I'm saying, I'm Kai and Janet by nature in this situation, looking at it, but at the same time, I'll do it as a schmuck or a jerk or as part of the movie. So when I'm looking at it, it has more relationship of I and thou in it. What's creatively or spiritually right. And I say, I try to create a situation for myself where I'm not doing, where there's a kind of invitation. It would be almost like a child entrusting an invitation from its mother rather than trusting it from a stranger or something like that. And the invitation may even be the same, but from the mother, you understand that there is probably a molecular exchange taking place on many levels of communication, but somehow there's a trust. And if you try to medically locate trust or physically locate, what is this trust? You do see some body release when the child trusts, that you also see it in attention when it doesn't. And that trust may be a variable. Does it literally trust? It may not trust what you wanted to eat or something like that, or it doesn't feel right about it. But basically, I found, as I told you, when my foot had just gotten so swollen and looked like amazing, it was more like caring for a baby than it was about curing the condition or something like that. It kind of needed an affectionate attention from you. Not so much to cure it or get rid of it or do all that as if it was a bother. And like the baby can be a bother and you just wanted to shut up, but then you see that the baby picks up when you're lying or when you're on a trip and it's requiring you to be in love with it before it lets you hold it in a way or before it lets you touch it in a way. So I was finding, however dumbly naive it was, there was a similar sentiment in that you didn't own your leg and tell it what to do and stuff like that, but that somehow your leg, if anything's going to tell you, it's telling you what to do. And it's telling you to look at it.
Yeah.
And it's telling you to look at it in a way that not only that you're trying to get rid of it, because it can pick that up, but that you see that somehow you've been neglecting it. And it's not spelled out, but you see how many years you haven't looked at your foot in this way, unless it gives you a problem or something. So then you start to see in our circumstance that situations are forcing us into a more conscious relationship to the body, where the body is not some separate entity that you're caring for doing this, but is you. And you see that 90% of you is also this immune system and the body, and it has been a remarkable cooperative happening. And as you perceive it, you start to lose ownership of it. And you have more, as you perceive it deeply, you start to see that your relationship to your body is an agreement. And it is not only like the love affair, hey baby, do you want to do this thing? And that hey baby has a kind of purity to it, where it's not dominated by the history or the survival, but there's a feeling that allows you then to go into the story. And you can say, hey, baby, should we try this or whatever? And it's more of a dream state. And so this article of this fellow with his book out there, if you can locate it, is what was the name I said before? But it was very nice the way he put it, which is happening anyway. And it's the Oracle of Night, the history and science of dreams. But then he says he wants to write a brief history of the human mind with dreams as the connecting thread. Incompleteness, displacement, condensations, multiplicity of characters, unexpected returns, details that have no apparent explanation, and even a lack of relevant details will be our traveling companion. We should now allow ourselves to be carried by the current. So then what the basis is for you now is that basically if you're up, you can then start exploring the dream state from a different, usually when you're up in the night, thinking takes over. What you should do, tomorrow's bills, what you have to do, can you do, so somehow the thinking apparatus runs in that space. His premise is that you can reach the dream apparatus, where then you're seeing it. So it's worth a read, I think, or just even looking it up. I think it's online. He has some things like that. But then you familiarize yourself with there's a whole world of people that are exploring that from a different basis, the nuances. And what do you think, Urja? Are you still doing doula, death doula things?
What do you mean doing? I'm not doing anything. I use it here and there with people in my building.
Maybe we'll explain it. There are doulas. And the doula were usually meant midwives. So the doula word usually applied to children coming in, but they also were doulas that saw people out. And they didn't see that much of a difference from seeing you in and seeing you out, that it was all a natural phenomenon. So then let's say that there are now, if you research in your neighborhood to see if there are doulas, you may find out that there are some really, I discovered here, I went to the talk and there were, I don't know, 16, 19 women who were really brilliant and really together. And some were doctors or retired or this or that, but they didn't apply the medical aspect to it, although they do how to care for you if you were in trouble. But it was a kind of mutual recognition of what I later introduced in this situation, because there were many people who were working with living and dying perceptively. But then when in fact you are at a certain age or a circumstance or your body is this way, then living and dying is actually happening in a literal way. So that's why a young person seeing an old person will see a kind of dying person or an old one who's out of the picture while they're in the picture. And in being in the picture, the non-existence of death as a literal reality, but a fear of something happened that would cause it. So fear is a basis of relating to what you call death. The ending of you is what we call death. And so it's fear-based, but it's fear based on the you continuing as if it's the owner of the story. But then as you explore in life, you start to see that you are the container of a happening. Not the cause of the happening, but the experiencer of the happening. And then you discover somehow when you have relationships, they introduce you to other dimensions that were parallel to you all along, but somehow the relationship opened up that doorway where you could take a chance on something or try something or create something when it was non-existent hours or days before. So as you meet parallel universes in your life, the parallel universe becomes the natural, second nature to you now. It's almost as if you are in a theater or a writer or a movie maker. Then you're seeing the life from the creative perspective also. So then when you see the survival perspective from the creative vision, it's almost as if you have to pay rent for the theater to do its show. So the theater somehow knows it has to pay rent, but it's free to have its performance. So the paying of the rent allows you a kind of creative freedom. So let's say that you see that work, as they call work, which is maybe an invention of each social construct, but you see from the creative perspective, work is second nature to you. Or who you are is not something you do separately from what you are. It's almost as if you're an actor or you're a writer or you're this or that. You see, you're bringing a creative component into your everyday. So now when you then have a literal situation of survival and you have the basis of your work is creative, then you will have certain challenges that come your way that are natural. Because one aspect of the life of continuity is literalness. And the other basis of life is exploration, or that you explore the evocative dimensions of life to see what's hidden. To be able to reconcile that is to assume identity, just as an actor or where you enter the story, where you assume the identity, and the identity then is you, but it's not literally you, it's evocatively you, and you're drawing on certain elements in yourself that are naturally for you to draw on when you're doing yourself. But if you were doing yourself in an acting experience, you would be drawing on your experience to locate what the person in the story is expressing. So let's say that throughout one's life, there are visits to alternative universes that are coexisting, but that the literal identity survival is the predominant feature that everything seems to acquiesce to. So when the questions of life are looked at from the survival perspective, then competition becomes the norm. And then in competition, you then start to have literalization of group thinking that claim to have a history as their mandate. And yet you see that as you've lived a life of exploration or attempt to have lived a religious life or a creative life, you start to see that your history is not the determinant factor of who you are. That, as Catherine just did there, as you explore through the art of writing, exploring your own life, you see it was not your own life. It was a life lived. And as you explore it and remember it, you start to see other people's feelings of the situation that was somehow blocked in order to continue. So some of the perspectives that one has as they're floating over their literal life is to see holy shit, is to see something called holy shit, where the people in the story were making up their own stories of what was going on. And as you revisit it flying over, you see it from a whole other space. It was creative for the whole time. It was never literal. But the closer you got to gravity, the more it literalized. The more it assumed an identity and the more it was identity driven. But in retrospect, when you view the life, you see that your life was more almost an experiment. And that much of what you did was to have the experience. If you felt for someone, somehow a doorway of an experience that you would have never chosen for yourself all of a sudden wakens up. And that there's an experience waiting for you. Now, there's not only in the experience, there's a full heart and a broken heart inherently in the circumstance. Because in one sense, the story had to be real enough for you to have the full experience. So it's only in retrospect that you see the depth of the journey in the being then taking a shape at birth and then having a life towards an experience that's waiting for them. So when you're dealing with your children, you're kind of dealing also with children who will be. And you could see that some of the conversations that you have in a moment may be that you're then talking to someone 30 years old, you know, And it's the same person. Okay, so I was experiencing that with Raphael and Seth, and that you experienced it 20 years later or whatever. And okay, you see the conversation that you had then. And you'll see the manifestation of the conversations you're having in time. You want the job. But you also understand that it's now, at this point in time, it's not at sacrifice. That somehow the caring for what you're doing is part of what is a larger picture that's happening for you. And what would be the unusual is that the kids would love for you to have a life. Normally, kids would insist that you continue being mom. Okay, this is what we were finding with Segway. And they say, no, my mommy looked after me. Thanks, Mom. I appreciate that. Now we're sharing another thing. I see the story.
They have a hard time seeing beyond their own experience right now.
I understand that's why this weird, honest conversation, you know, what kind of trickery I had to use to grab Segway into it, and this one and that one, you know, into an honest conversation. Okay. And it wasn't such a big deal, literal honest. It's that they see what you see 10 years later. Or they see what we shared. I see the kids run in, they say, holy, but I'm seeing them from the future, from the circumstance that they're in, from creatively, how they're working it, to what extent they're free from the story. So let's say it exists on many levels, and yet it's just, somehow you escaped the flood in Pennsylvania. How come?
I don't know, it's pouring right now, but yeah, I live by a river too, and we got that didn't even come up over the bank. So I'm not quite sure what happened there.
Yeah. It's a funny thing. It's, you're okay, Kai?
Yeah, I'm okay.
I mean, all knock on wood, you're okay, Urja? You feel that there's a year in the, I mean, there may be more, but if there's more, then you can get some more out of it if you wish. So then they were saying, well, what was the Bitcoin like for you? And they say, Bitcoin would be like having a box in the bank, but you don't have it declared or anything. It's your private thing when you can go in and take out what you want or whatever. And so you had that amount, and you didn't want to be a sneak about it, and you don't want to hide this or hide that or whatever, because you're always a jerk when they turn you into a crook, when you're not a crook. Okay. So generally, I was seeing it as it seemed to have some of the elements of just what my paintings were or what my artwork was. That somehow you could even go to the bank and they'll give you a kind of value against your this or the mortgage. So I have this dumb idea, but I'm keeping it dumb, but it's not exactly dumb for me. It's kind of creatively free, but without having to be a sneak and a liar and a hider and joining that group. So we're in it, but not of it. What you're caring for is that there's a flow in your life so that certain projects that you're into, you can try. Now, some of the projects that we're into are heavy duty. It's even harder than having a factory job in many ways. So it's not the avoidance of work. It is that somehow the work has to speak to you. So somehow there's something inherent in us that doesn't do slavery well. So whenever the situation turns to slavery, which was once a voluntary act, but then you have to do it and you need to do it, or you're going to have your ass kicked if you don't do it, or you're going to be called this or that. And all of those things are true in that literal world. But in the creative world, the person who's falling from the literal framework is a person who's also finding a way to leave prison. That there's that in order to survive in the literal survival, you have to squash a soulfulness in yourself. that would then, because the soulfulness would say, hey, this job ain't right, or this ain't the right thing. But then you see the survivor won't say that. We'll bury it.
Mhm.
So there is an element in it that basically you're doing it because you want to do it. You feel like doing it. There's an agreement. But then you say, no, you're doing it because they're whipping you and you got a gun to your head and you have to do it. Or, I say, so then you see a similar thing. It may be the same thing of doing, but having a very different, where one may be eager to see if I, look, they say, you want to have a job in McDonald's? I said, holy shit, that would be a real movie for me. But it wouldn't be I have a job at McDonald's because I need to have a job at McDonald's. I wouldn't mind having a job at McDonald's to see what the hell the experience would be like for me. So then as I'm looking back at my life, I'm seeing just experiences. And now each level of experience was necessary to the next level of experience. And at some level of experience, it shifted the plane. And it was like you were making different movies. You went from comedy to serious movies to drama to, so then you started to see, even though it was a thread running through it, of assuming an identity towards an experience, you saw the many faces of the experience that you've had. When it literalized and this and that, when that happened, and you visit yourself, not as yourself, but there are dimensions that are perceived that a friend traveling with you would have perceived. That would be news to you if you heard it. That can be accessed. There's an event that throws you back. Sometimes it's fear or whatever, because it throws you back to an incident. And it shows that you've been avoiding that incident from 50 years ago or 20 years ago. And you've organized it into your life, but then you also know somewhere in you that there's a parallel movement that you're gonna meet someone in Walmart. You understand? 50 years later, I'm buying toothpaste or something. Okay, and so it has to be done. It can't be grandeur. It has to be kind of accidentally done. And so the past and the present are parallel. But for us, it seems that the past is the past. But then again, like you see, you mentioned last month or somewhere you woke up with a feeling. And somehow there was a communication. And even though years may pass, you're in that moment with the person.
Yeah, it started as a dream. It's really interesting.
Yeah, well, I'll explore a bit further with this guy because there are also other fellows in the work that they're doing. But what I'm saying is just like the breath, we're doing it anyway. So you kind of discover someone who's explored it even further in that way. But his whole sense is that
What's his name, Danny?
his name is his last name is Ribeiro Siddhartha, translated from the Portuguese. So I think they're Brazilian, but they have.
What was the next? What did you say after that? Siddhartha?
Is what? The name of the book is The Oracle of Night.
Oh.
But if you look it up online, then you have a few people talking there, and I think that you start to see as if you're in there. So it's just kind of getting it. You know what I mean? So there was something in the book where he kind of devoted himself to it, where then a dream is not simply a fragment of memory, but it's a privileged moment for prospecting unconsciousness. That's Jung's word. So then his life has been around that, but he's also a scientist, and he's also respected out there in the world. But it was very interesting where the premise of the dreams would be like you have a traveling companion. And so just but again, and looking into it, yeah, he talks about everything. He talks about melatonin, sleeping pills, the psychedelic drug, the effect on sleeping and dreaming, traumatic dreams, erotic dreams, dreams about people we have lost, and the universal dream of anxiety. His accounts of rich metaphorical dreams made me wish that my own weren't so fragmented and elusive. So basically, but he's kind of having you access that something that's happening normally, not changing it or defining it or owning it, but somehow being introduced to something that changes how you look at it.
Yeah.
You
Like
kind
that.
of see that your life is being lived on many levels. While you're sitting, somehow your life is being lived on many levels. And as I'm sitting with all the folks there trying to create a framework for an honest conversation, and that was the honest conversation, what's your thought about the vaccination, non-vaccination? It wasn't about vaccination or not, it was about nobody having to be a sneak or hiding. So that there's an agreement, that somehow there's an agreement was what I was trying to trick the situation. So you didn't have to hide here or do this or do that. That it had the sense of looking out for the other. It was not doing or don't doing. It was doing what was true to you. And even though you weighed the situation around you. Okay. So that's what I'm attempting to constantly, what I'm talking about, the dumb thing or the, of creating, but you can't have a forced conversation. A conversation has to come from a real place. So it then has to almost resemble that people who have a love affair or a love feeling for each other then share a conversation that's not so much out there in the world, but is a conversation between them that has the difference between the world makes you hide things that would have been natural. And the desire to love is probably natural. And if you then get in a situation where that love falls away, the desire is still there. The desire is not stupid. So that desire is still looking. So then what it has is it has a moment of confrontation waiting that you can see in there. The moment of confrontation that's waiting is because it's happening now. Then it will literalize. So then you see if the people try to save the marriage and they go to a counselor, and we had that joke about, I can't afford to come here 3 times a week or whatever, and the guy is out of it completely. But you see that they then try to manufacture or awaken or force the continuity of a circumstance. But in many cases, they wake up the people and say, hey, you know, baby, this isn't working anymore. I'm not into it anymore. Are you? Okay. So then you find out that that may not be a flaw. It is a flaw when you act it out without the honest conversation, because then in order to do that thing without the honest conversation, you have to be a rat, a sneak, you have to pull games, you have to accuse the other. So then you have to see that whatever love was there then starts to shift to hate. Then all of a sudden you come into a story where you have to manage that artificiality, where you know that people are now out to get you in some way, while you're smiling and saying, sure, how's everything going? Okay. And then you're saying, okay. And they're saying, you rat, and you know, you did this. Okay. So you see that it is in fact the effect of the situation. And then when people are released from the feeling for each other, they act out their personalities and stories. So it's almost like you step into a story. And at the same time, you have a reality, a literal reality going. And yet, as you look at each dimensions of it and really reflect on it, you see that somehow a feeling allowed something to happen. That without that feeling, logically, it would have been. So one is in it, it's not doing anything about it. You are, I am caring for something by your presence. And so you see that your presence is going to force heartfelt conversations in the circumstance that it's avoiding, that the heartfelt is being avoided because it interferes with the plans that people may have secretly. If they fall in love with you again, or if they have feelings of caring for you, then their plans may be messed up. So what a weird world it is. But basically, I think that you're in the story. I think that we're all in the story because we wish to be. And we wish to be for very real reasons, from what I can see. That there are people in it who love you. Without almost like a clear love, not even like a natural love. So it seems to me that you have a relationship to a natural love. Now the mind may have to make decisions literally about this world or that world, but basically, I don't think you can do anything that would contradict those feelings. So somehow anyone involved with you would have to see those feelings as really much a very part of you and what's happening. Because you have something that's automatic. It seems automatic, but you understand how hard the work was.
Yes.
And yet it just seems natural. Look at that, how the kids are, and look how sweet they are. And, you have to work 12 hours a day.
Oh my God, it's so true. Rod goes and preaches to everybody about how we have such a loving separation. I'm like, do you have any idea how much work I've
I may save this for you. You see this lady? I may save her for you. Is that okay?
Yeah.
But look how strong she is. That's what they pointed out to me. They wrote a whole paper on it about each of the meanings of the neck and this and that, how strong the person was and how beautiful the person was in that. It's on a stand. And yet, so this is what you've been doing for a while.
Yep.
See the face? What do
And
you
my
think?
back hurts. Her back looks like it would hurt. My
What do you
back
think,
hurts.
Gary? Doesn't that
I
look a
know
bit
why.
like Kai? Same kind of nose, isn't it? There is a book on that whole Northwest Coast culture and also what slavery in that culture. And they show you pictures of people. And there are quite a few things that people are somehow tied by their hair. And, so there's a couple of rattles. There's a rattle for dancing that shows a raven or something sticking his tongue into the mouth of a person like that and giving it information or something, or to a shaman. It's a shaman's rattle. And it's a dance rattle for it, but it then has a picture of certain animals, usually a raven. And then the shaman is riding on the back of the raven flying into it. And so they're all pretty remarkable stuff. I mean, when you see some of the Northwest Coast art, much of it is copies now. But even then, I have one piece where you open up an eagle's face, and then there's the soul. There's a person hidden in there, face in there, and it's covered because it looks like a face mask for a bird. But when you open it up, it's the soul of the person. So a person doing bird. Apparently, they had the capacity to assume animal behavior for themselves. So it's weird as you come to it. How are you doing, Kerry, now? You feel that you'll be floating soon?
Yeah, I feel like I am kind of floating already.
But no, is anyone saying, hey, baby, when I can hang out? Or are they saying, get your ass out of here, mother jump? So what level is it on?
Neither. I do have someone, a kind of an ex-girlfriend who's popping in, but she's kind of, she gets really into me, but she's very hot and cold. So I don't know. I'm trying to feel that one out and not make it too literal. And staying with just kind of the up in the airness right now. And that feels okay. I was offered a place to live. That's kind of seems like a good situation. It's a musician friend of mine's place, and it's month to month. So not a lot of commitment.
Well, if I looked at, we'll say, being a lover of yours, and they say, okay, Kerry, you want to hook up with Kerry? Say, I think with Kerry, you have to be hot and cold.
Maybe so.
If it's too hot, it gets weird. and cold, it kills it, but you have to be
Yeah.
hot and cold. And they say, how do you have to relate to Segway? And I say, you have to be hot and cold. Segway. He says, because he's going to want you to invest in or something like that. Okay. And it's not a literal relationship. It is one who's caring for you, but he does recognize that somehow if the kids asked you for something, you would kind of do anything. Sure, give it a try or whatever, try it. So somehow, hot and cold is not so dumb if I'm kind of sitting on a couch next to Carrie. I think hot and cold is a worthy try. Let's say if it has to be somewhat true.
Yeah.
And true is then what? It's not spelled out in the world that you literally have a contract, but true may not. For us, it would be more true that you'll kind of remember the person forever, and that it sits in a pure state. Even though you sort through the issues, you understand there'll be a moment when the issues won't be in the way of what happened. So then you'll start to see that what looked like issue orientation and problems was a creative life, and that certain things couldn't be false. The people didn't know it, but there was a limit to how sneaky they can be. Okay. Before they're good, because they're so naive, it's going to be perceived very quickly. So let's say that hot and cold was not exactly dumb. Hot and cold meant that if the feeling wasn't there, somehow you were released from the story. Now, the release was automatic, but then you may have to find ways to be released that always are dumb. But the release that happens automatically is not dumb. It's that you can't do something that required you to be in love, or you can't do something that required you to be human, where you then have to make believe. So something has been interrupted, where the make believe then becomes the reality. And then obviously a person is going to screw up in the make believe world because they're hiding much of their life.
Right.
So then the person who's involved with you is going to stumble upon something, or you're going to stumble upon something that reveals something. But what it reveals is it kind of breaks the thread of connectedness. And yet you see how naive the connectedness was. It was dependent on it being what they call naive, but it was actually dependent on it being almost childlike, a trust.
Yeah.
So that's considered naive or dumb in the literal world. But in the creative world, naive is a very important aspect of the exploration, meaning that you don't lay a trip on the exploration so much. So it was called, when other people would say it's self-explanatory, you would see another dimension in the story. So then you would see on one level it's self-explanatory, but on another level, other issues were happening. And then as you explored it even further, you would almost see you would start to see karmic roots in situations. So they could say to Carrie, holy shit, your father did that 43 years ago. What you doing now? Okay, yeah, it was like that. And you say, holy shit, you meet your father in a situation that you're in. Okay. And you say, is it your literal father? And I say, he was never a literal father. It literalized as father, but he was a person doing father. And so it existed on many levels. And then I say, if I wrote the book or I wrote the play, and I say, how would I be Carrie's father? Just like we say, how would I be Carrie's girlfriend? And I would say, Mensa Mensa is probably pretty intelligent. This is called Mensa Mensa, like this and like that. That I like him a lot, and this and that, but he's really does some dopey stuff. Would you agree with them? Let's say the resume for Kerry will be, you like him a lot, but he does a lot of dopey things.
I could see that.
I can use him in my movie. I need a guy who you like a lot and does a lot of dopey things to be in the movie. I say, okay, you're not really doing this or that, but let's say you can play a guy who people like a lot and does some really dopey things. But
Right.
not horrible dopey things or evil dopey things, but dopey.
Right.
You think you can play the role?
Maybe I've been playing that role a bit,
Okay,
but
but I think you can get 20,000 for 2 weeks on in the San Francisco.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if I could do it for
Okay.
a
So
job.
is there a way to visit one's life from a different perspective? And of course, the creative use of your life doesn't only have to be mellow or this or that. It can expose everything,
Yeah.
but it's the life lived. But it no longer has the possessive. It's seen from a different point. One gets a glimpse of that. And usually one has to be helpless in a situation for them to get a glimpse that the doer was not so important in their life. You see that doing was only an aspect of what your life has been about. As you fly over it, you fly over before you see how that enters into the literal world, just as if the kids inherit an illness that you've had, that you may have inherited or whatever. You see that the illness also has a life. It's not an illness in itself. It's a thing that's continued through generations or whatever. And so then you start to see dimensions in your life. There's not so much a possessor. So let's say that what you've managed apparently, and especially if you've hooked up with John that way, is flux.
Yep.
And so let's say as you enter into attractive relationships that have feelings, hey baby feelings in them.
Yeah.
There's a promise in that attraction as you enter into the story. And there's a kind of promise as you meet each other of being there. It's not spelled out. And it can't be holy shit being there if cancer comes in the picture or whatever. I don't know if I want to do this. Okay. But you also understand that as soon as you enter into the relationship becomes a fact, then whatever happens in it also, it may not affect the neighbors or the strangers or this or that, but your lover having an illness strong that you're living with, all of a sudden you don't, I sign on for illness. And I say, it's not a question you sign on, it comes with the experience. But if you discover that it was kept hidden from you, before you connect. So there's a difference in having the shared experience together that comes out of it. And so it's a remarkable thing. If the relationship affair then starts from the moment where it's not bringing the history into the story, but the attraction is so strong that it kind of starts from a free place. Then the history is no longer dominating. The history is a mystery. And that's why I was saying with your father, then you did experience your father and you, as yourself, and you see the mystery of life. There's not exactly genetics, and although they've tried to describe an unreal world scientifically and medically, a world that we can't see, but they posit is real. We understand that we are surrounded by the mystery. And that may be the simple thing that somehow floating over my head is a million little characters trying to get into my nose or my ear or something like that to get a meal out of it. Okay. And yet it's so, and yet it's a preposterous idea. Okay. And somehow the person navigates the world as if it's second nature to them now. And they normalize, walk through it. But when they hear what the world is from so many other places, it's about to end because of global warming, this is about to happen, that is about to happen, the collapse is there, you better do this and you better do that. And here as schmoes, we're just walking down the street with our hands in our pockets, looking at the world. We think that love affairs are important. We think that friendships are important. We think that eating right or living in a way that has that has a kind of its own internal beauty. How dumb it sounds in the world in flame. How dumb it sounds in about to go nuts. That you've got 3 weeks. What do you think? One fellow teaches that you have 2 weeks to live.
Mhm.
Then you work your day and you work your time period from the principle that you have 2 weeks to live. So there are many attempts of sneaking up on the dying process.
Mm.
But the perception of it is that somehow you've died already and you've re-entered the story. And usually it is not cancer and this and that, it is the loss of a love that sends you to a place that even cancer can't reach. It's soul searching, but immediately sends you there. And the brain and the person immediately tries to get out of that place because it's more located with dying than it is with living. But in that space where the heart is broken, you also see a dimension of the existence that cannot be seen by the literal mind, because it's death to the literal mind. So then you understand that in the creative body, the loss of a true love is the death experience while you're alive. Not the death experience, which is a natural aspect of the life, but the death experience to be experienced while you're in the body, while you're in the being. And see it, get a glimpse of the world from the other side, from the mirror looking into the story. And then re-entering the story. And then you see that you are not you, you are assuming the identity towards an expression, just as if it resembles a creative process, just as if it was a novel of you. You've assumed an identity towards a creative expression. And so when a fellow was asking recently that they had a diagnosis of dying or bad condition, as most of us have had now, some of us that are together now, so has been an immersive with John and the other fellow John and a few other, Marty and a few other folks who have an immediacy about dying with their diagnosis where they shout out, "You're dying," in the room, not that's something in the future, not because it's a flaw, but it's just a fact revealed to you. And then it's your call whether you want to try some things to keep it going. And I say that would be from our perspective, that it's not automatic that they save you or they do this or do that.
Right.
And if some heartfelt conversations, you may say, okay, let's try this because you feel for the person. And so that may, like I say, I feel for Kai, that allows me into a Bitcoin world or something like that. But I also know that Kai doesn't know Bitcoin, that she has people who like her who will explain Bitcoin. You know? So then I'm doing my own dumb magic. But it's not exactly magic. I'm keeping, if Kai has a friend doing something for her, the doer in her doesn't have to do it. So then something one's looking out for you. So then that's how, so Mary is the Meshuggah invitation to the vaccination, or I have to make it look normal because I'm not unlike Janet. I'm not pro with this or pro with that. I'm looking for, so even though I don't have I don't do this or I don't do that, I do drive past vaccination signs and I said, maybe one day I'll get it or I should try. So I'm leaving it as a movie based on basically what my feelings are in the moment, in the situation, but should be, shouldn't be, I'm not in that level, as if it's a rule or a law. But I still feel it's coming from your intelligence in a way. And intelligence doesn't mean your ego. It means that you're caring for something in yourself. And so I can see that that Ursula would have to get it almost by accident. Everybody would find their own way. Jai would have her daughter kick the crap out of her and grab her by the nose and bring her down there. Okay. So then everyone has their own weird scene. Good luck. But everyone has so the do or don't is somewhat relative. We somehow have to be, can't move out of fear or dictation or anything like that. Is that okay? Kind. But everyone around is kind of agreeing with you too in your surroundings or in your situation there?
Yeah, we check in every once in a while. I mean, I like the being yourself in a high vibration keeps you out of danger, out of harm's way.
Yeah.
And that's what Dr. Joe actually did the scientific testing on that with the virus, and the results were pretty incredible. So my thought was actually proven scientifically. So and my family's pretty much in agreement with that when we talk about it.
If
Because I keep checking in with them.
If I ask Janet to talk here, you'll see your sister talking the same stuff. In fact, she may.
My sister feels the same way too.
Yeah. So, Janet. Janet. Oh, who is that? Janet? No, it's not Janet. But that basically, no, I understand that, and she's. Well, you don't want to get too rad with that though, because then you're close to QAnon.
No, I'm not close to QAnon at
No,
all.
of course, no. Of course, we're going to be schmucks for the QAnon. But you see,
No, I don't feel that it's a conspiracy theory. I just feel that it's actually when I tune in and ask the divine, that's the answer I keep getting, is that my vibration is high enough to stay away from it.
So then I do a dome thing like that, but I don't stay away or not stay away. I'm not in it. Once I perceive it, I'm not in it in the first place. So
Exactly.
So if they say, okay, QAnon, I says, I'll catch you later. There's some things that you maybe could, and they say Black Lives Matter. I say, I understand the process that are happening, but basically it doesn't literalize that way for me. I'm not prejudiced just by nature. In the situation, I see the situation, I can goof with it. Okay. So then it seems to me that as a human being, if in fact you're coming from being a human being, then you don't easily join this thing or that thing or whatever shouts out, because your relationship is with something that's much softer and much has a grace to it. So let's say in simple terms, we're not willing to surrender the grace to the survival. If we survive without the grace, it's not existence for us. It's okay. So somehow we're individually translating feelings into the world, and the feelings aren't that different. So I could see a brilliant Urja who everything had to happen to you accidentally. You understand, just sitting there, you got it, you didn't get it, you got shots, you didn't get shots, but you didn't have to decide this, I'm going to do that, and so much, somehow it left you. So let's say that each of us who have shared some time with each other somehow have been touched by the human element in our story. And in some cases, the person can't make a buck because they have to kill somebody else, or they can't do this, or they can't cheat on this or that. So somehow they found out that somehow, because there's something that we've shared, that it's kind of forcing you to be human in the situation, no trip. Because your trip, when you take up a trip, it's obvious. So let's say that if Kai comes to a situation or feeling, is coming from a deeper place that much of the population may not share with her. So when they're logical about it, then you can't say, well, you put the lime in the coconut, you shake it all up. You can't really give them a full literal philosophy around it. But a person, if they feel for you, may respect where you're coming from. And so then if you perceive to some degree where the people in your situation are coming from, then doing or not doing is not as important as the feeling that you're sharing. But if the doing or the not doing then changes the feeling that people have for each other, well, that's what you have generally happening out there.
It's huge. And it seems like everybody is on one side or the other. It's disturbing.
And I don't know how to be on one side, or I could make believe on one side or the other. Okay. But I could,
Like what they did to your dog. I can't even fathom that.
Then the normalcy of the madness, the normalcy of the violence, is inherently in the form. And those who then have to witness something that you have no choice, and there's no activity of preventing it, but you experience it, it touches places in you that you die before you die. And somehow the dying experience then comes back into the life with you. And when it does, then I meet this guy in the dream state, because then my regular life is the dream state, where I'm assuming identities for the circumstance, where I'm doing this, but the basis of your presence is that inherently in you there's an honest conversation that won't lie, or won't cover it up, or won't trick it up, but is more a mirror effect. So when people are coming to you for a perspective or a reading, they're actually coming to you for a mirroring reflection on something that's not in the everyday life.
Yeah.
Okay. Has that been okay? Has there anyone else been on that I haven't connected with? But again, that book may be good but again, online, you find out a lot about the fellow and about other fellows who are in that area too, who are exploring.
Yeah,
for exploring health and things from a different perspective, from the journey.
Who was on today? Sophia, John, Jason, all said hi.
Okay, is everyone okay out there? So far, let's be okay for another week. But if there's anything, well, again, for all of us, if there's something happening over your head that needs some reflection or light shed on it. And so that's when we were talking to the Rafi and others, that they're kind of, we've had a life where they're free to find their voice, but we're always here for them.
Yeah.
You know, so that they're not stuck in a place, in a situation where they're free to experiment with the situation or that situation. But if they get in ahead, they can always have a couple of weeks to hang out and see where they're at and what they like and create something else. So it's not, I felt then that parenting at one point was being there for you. But that it was also, you were free to find your voice. But that there were certain experiences waiting for most of our kids out there that will be very challenging for them because they have elements of us in them. So, you know, but at the same time, they're dreaming. And they kind of understand somehow inherently, even just the way he was sitting there before, and he was going to explain Bitcoin. Is that what was he going to do before, Kai?
No, he was going to tell Catherine how to adjust the color on her camera.
Oh, that's brilliant, isn't it? So, okay. But then did you see when Catherine's grandson came in there and he said, we said, are you a rapper? And he said, I'm a poet. And then his grandfather was the poet laureate of India. I don't know if you knew that. I don't think you met him or anything like that, but the grandfather.
Catherine's husband, yeah.
That was Catherine's husband. So then you see, look at the movie of their life. And then she had a life in movies after that.
Mm.
Touched by an Angel. She wrote Touched by an Angel.
With Dolly Parton, right?
What a weird world, isn't it? What do you say, Kerry? Do you want to write something like Touched by an Angel?
Never saw that, actually.
When they were saying what kind of, when Segway was saying what kind of business, and then I said, you know, why don't you just do the store and do Let's Make a Deal in the store? Have you ever seen Let's Make a Deal? We have all these people in costume dramas and this and that. And I said, you just do a Let's Make a Deal where you can win cashmere sweaters from this, and you have a contest going on like that. Because the store and the businesses are in flux anyway. You know, just, or passing it on or shifting or whatever. So everything is in the kind of flux. But I'm also saying, yeah, let's see how that goes. Where our circumstances in flux, but I say the flux is built into it because it's a creation. As long as people went into it, it existed. Who the hell wanted to be in a situation where 10 people hate each other?
Yeah.
Have a kind. So okay, so you understand it was not exactly stupid not paying the mortgage or not doing this. Okay, so then basically it still was into it because people were into it. If people weren't into it any longer, then the plumbing is dopey. This is that. You got dogs barking at you. So let's say the literal reality comes into it. It's a magical reality. While we're in it, you got these 3 beautiful dogs barking and this and that, chasing coyotes or whatever the hell they're doing. I can't imagine the movie I'm in. I got 3 dogs chasing coyotes, and at 8 o'clock at night, all of a sudden you hear a sound. They open the door on their own. They run out there, and the barking is so heavy. And they say, I come from a place where you don't really have animals that own them. Let's say through the situation I'm in, I'm allowing myself a Meshuggah life where I'm watching shows on TV or Netflix, or I'm doing this or doing that, and yet I'm finding a deeper spiritual dimension in it all. As I kind of have passed away and I'm in the body still. And so I'm seeing then the world from not being in it in that way, to some degree. Now, there may be something that grabs you by the nose and pulls you into the reality of it. But from the perspective I am, the reality is not the sole reality. And I don't even see it as a conspiracy theory. I see it, it's too absurd to be conspirers.
Mm.
If you were in the room together hearing them conspire, it would sound so lame. So even though there are conspiracies out there, when you run into them, they're kind of lame dudes talking shit. And even though they may touch upon something real, this happened, that the Jews are doing this, the Irish are doing that, whatever the story is, it may be true, but it's not truth. So let's say to some degree, we've attempted to have a creative dimension in our life. And that creative dimension looks at the regular life a little bit from a different place than a regular survival. If it's not somehow creatively happening, there is a loss the person feels, even if they're doing well literally. So let's say there's also a dimension that is built to be in love, and it's not explored. Just like the dream state is not explored from another dimension, it's seen as this or that. But then as you explore it as another sense, then if you're a musician, you develop certain senses that other people may not need to develop. In your hearing and your tuning and your rhythm. So then, in fact, if you start to see that dreaming is a sense of yours, and that it gives you information like smelling, like hearing, like seeing, but that the information it gives you is not to the literal person so much, but has you longing. So let's say the dream state may disturb the situation you're in if the love is lost and the continuity is taken over. And the dream state would register. Do you understand? It would register because the dream state will say is not a dream state, but is another sense.
Mm.
And there is something somewhere in the person that is seeking love. It is not seeking love only because it has a psychological condition or it's uptight or it's lonely. There is a dimension that is sending out a message to the mystery in the history. I hope this doesn't sound too whacked, but it's doing it anyway. If you send someone an email or something, you are sending it into the mystery, into the history. So we're doing it already. We're acting as if it's normal that you can send an email 1,000 miles away into the, and it's normal.
Yeah.
And then the person may call you up the next day, or someone called me from Sweden the next day, Ingmarie, and you can see her there in Sweden, and it's normalized. So you see that everything that is being normalized was inherently there in the being. So the discoveries that are happening were inherently there in the dormant aspect. They had to be discovered. Once they're discovered, the energy is released. So let's say that you've lived a life of a creative premise that is normalized for you. And it is that relationship, if it comes to a point of, hey, baby, somehow you can share a room together. Or someone who may have been a perfect stranger or this or that, all of a sudden a shared feeling is there. And that feeling may allow you to enter into a space that was impossible the day before. But all of a sudden becomes natural. And then all of a sudden it's natural for you to walk down the street with a lover where a week before you were a lonely dude having pizza someplace. Okay. And then all of a sudden you're a happy dude saying, come on, let's have another slice. Let's watch something on Netflix. And then you see Netflix is not Netflix. Netflix is a different thing. If in fact you're watching Netflix with a lover, then you're watching something that's very different than the movie that you watched before. A shared experience. And a shared experience that naturalizes when a week before it was unnatural. You would have to run up on the person and say, look, you want to watch a Netflix? And they would say, leave me the hell alone. Are you crazy? And then all of a sudden with a lover, they say, let's watch a Netflix. They say, sure, let's watch something. It'll be great. Let's call Ursula to find out what to watch. She's Miss Netflix, they say, and for Colorado.
Mhm.
So this goofy conversation to me has a spiritual edge to it. And it's hidden in goofiness, where we're kind of naturalizing different dimensions that run through our life. And they seem like hidden dimensions until you have an experience that awakens it. And then if you, in fact, you have an experience where dying and living are normal in the everyday, then you start to see a whole life where the fear of death is organized into the literal story, so that it avoids information that comes its way or looks the other way. And so then but what is missing is that in the fear of a literal death, one misses a conversation with the dying process, which is normally happening. And it's a living and dying conversation. And the conversation has some elements of the immune system is having that conversation with the systems that it's maintaining and caring for. And then each aspect of the body, the liver maintaining for certain aspects of the body, the lungs maintaining, they're all having a conversation that's hidden from you in plain sight, unless something goes wrong and then you want to correct it or take a pill or knock it out or get rid of it and get rid of the pain. But the pain is also indicating a happening. And I'm not only talking about a medical happening that you then have to re-explore, but a reflection where the pain then is not, you may have to get rid of the momentary pain, but the pain is then causing what is happening reflection. And you see that there is a moment that's forcing you to look at your life. And in looking at your life, even for a moment, you start to have an appreciation of the body, where you thought you had to dictate to the body what to eat and what to do. And you start to see that there are dimensions that are existing within you. And then as you meet it, you fall in love with it to some degree. And you discover a kind of naturalness in your body by discovery. And so the discovery of the naturalness in the body is a body that is navigating through the literal world of time and space. So then you say, is there a before life? You see, if you discover certain circumstances of your parents, that you can see how it looked before you literally arrived. And then you can see the identity put on you as you literally arrived, and the identity is you, but you see that there was a you before you arrived. And it does seem that the you before you arrive enters into the story with you. So the you and is literal. The history of you seems to have a moment waiting for it where it ends, but then it seems to release other dimensions. I was seeing that at the table where I couldn't say something to the younger people in some way, but then you see the same conversation if I passed away at the table. They would explore that very thing that, okay. So your presence may be in the way of the very exploration of who you were and what you were. So I then saw a situation that is intending to have a life of its own and was determined to carry on that one. And so then you see, it would have to stop what it was doing to reflect on what was happening. But no matter how many tricks I would use, hey, this has happened, so even trying to get, and I say, okay, we'll try to invest you guys, we'll give you a Bitcoin for your birthday, to try to trick them into being interested in Bitcoin, you see, and somehow they got out of it. Okay. So then we got Kai, we got others to talk Bitcoin. We were trying to trick hip people to give us a sense of it or whatever. And I think that was introduced by, a little bit by Spiro, who may come here in a day or two, also on his way out. Mary's leaving Sunday for New York, and she'll be gone about 12 days or so in New York. That's the plan. And then I think folks who are visiting here, Rafi and others, will probably leave around Thursday. So we've had visits and situations here. You okay, Urja?
Yes, Danny.
Anything that you had in mind, Derek? Or you're just screwing with it?
Nothing really that comes to mind.
Well,
Everything seems okay for the most part.
Look, I'm stumbling upon works that reflect what we're doing anyway. So when I say the breath book, for 30 years I've been doing that technique of breathing through the nose alone. And the premise was that his premise, which I did buy because we were doing pranayama before that, and then mantras before that. And without consciously knowing it, then we were doing prayers through the nose and stuff like that through your breath. Okay. So then later on, when I read the book, then I see that he's researched a lot of avenues. You know, so it's like reading about relatives or something like that. You see each of them went a different way, but they all shared a certain feeling. So there's intensity to explore that, then open up a lot of avenues that you were doing anyway. So I'm coming upon these things like the dreamer because we're doing it anyway. We have consciously, to some degree, employed what you would call dream, but what we call dream is more like hearing or smelling. So it's like describing smelling, a smell, and that smells like garlic in the other room or something like that. So you see that the sense can pick out, it's remarkable to be able to smell garlic in another room, and it's normal. But not only can you smell it, but you can identify it, you can probably see who's doing it, and what you can see a whole theater from the smell. You can see what the meal to some degree is from the smell. Certainly some Italian meals, from the smell, you can figure out if it's lasagna or this. Okay, so you see that it's already happening. A so-called creative or spiritual life is already happening. We seek it out in the future because we're moving in literal time, but it's coexisting. So it's when you have a challenge to the continuity, it becomes something of a death experience to the person. If you interrupt their continuity, there's a fear in that. Not only a fear of not having enough money, you'll have to leave the house, you'll have to do that. So the continuity you take of your literal situation, you take for granted as if it always exists. When it never existed before, it's only existing now. But let's say you are protecting the continuity of your situation to some degree. But you're also protecting an experience that's happening, that's in the midst of happening now while you're waiting, while you're in it. So some of us, they'll call it a death experience as if there's a literal death waiting for us where we're going to keel over on Tuesday or something. Or there's a lover waiting for you, or there's a knock on the door waiting for you. So all of these elements that somehow there is something waiting in the story. Now we can literalize it and say, sure, you're going to die. And I say, no, there's something in the dying that's different than the death is the social construct of an ending of the self. You see now, you can pass away and your computer will live another 50 years with your information. Yeah. Okay, so you see that fact alone, that you will live on, even though you don't live on, you're living on. Where your daughter will say, holy shit, my mother was doing that. I didn't know my mother was doing that. Okay. So let's say that finding your computer 5 years later will discover an urge that no one knew about. Okay. Let's say the memory of you, that before there was a computer to find that out, there was a memory of you that would happen accidental. And somehow someone included you in their memory of something growing up or having this experience or whatever. And it's as real as anything else. So let's say even in the love affair, in the absence of the love affair, it exists deeply. So somehow absence and presence are poetic fragrances of a situation. And the deeper it is, the more it exists in absence. And absence then, now years it was explained to me that everything that's separated seeks to connect again. And everything that's connected then seeks to separate it, and that this process is ongoing for all living forms. And I was introduced to that when they said that they used to take the chemicals out of the gasoline and bury them, and that the chemicals would seek water to recreate gasoline. That when you separated components from the gasoline, they sought to recreate themselves. So first and then it's like the children living home and the children coming back home. You know, and that somehow the leaving home is really important experience, but then there's an attraction or an incident happens or a situation takes place where home starts to exist in the moment for you. So somehow, even though there's a space for you to come to, but try your thing out there, that somehow normalizes in your consciousness. And that there's a place where you can be relaxed and free for a moment, where just being you is the price of admission. No trip. You have relationship with people who love you and you love them, and so somehow there's no trip. You may hide things that would hurt them or something, but somehow each person is caring for the other in a way, or looking out for each other. Looking out for each other without it being spelled out can be on the highest level if you're a scientist exploring space, or you were writing music together, or you were in a relationship that was in trouble or whatever, but looking out for each other runs through the story. And that's when the feeling is lost, then there is a kind of competition that exists. When that happens in relationship, then you see that the people who are touch with each other and caring for each other then start to compete. So you see that cooperation and competition are inherently in the story once you walk into it. When there's a feeling, there's a kind of cooperation. When that feeling is lost, then the person and you are in a race for something. And it then usually breaks down into different backgrounds, different circumstances, different beliefs, or whatever. But then the same person doesn't, like Jesus said, doesn't have a place to put his head to identify with. You see that you have a friendship, you walk past the family, you have the kid waves at you, you see you have a friendship with it, but you're not in the literal family. But if you saw someone being abused in the family, you would say, come on, bro, what are you? Just your presence would interrupt the status quo. So in your presence, the violence can exist. Somehow it becomes aware of you seeing it. It may try to kill you because you see it. And when you see it, so then somehow the relationships that you'll have, you'll understand that the people that you're with see it. They know you see something. That may make them happy and it may make them pissed. Because if you see something, it may interrupt the status quo. Because then I say, well, hold it. If they're avoiding a conversation about vaccine, that's a drag. Because I feel that all the people are made of the same material with each other. So, and I say, it's not avoidance. Why is it okay? Do you have an agreement? Sure, let's do this or that. And you see that you're doing it. But not out of, again, gun to your head, circumstance or whatever. But you see that I would be both persons, the doer and the not doer. I'm the schmuck. But I wouldn't take God wants you to do this or take a stand or anything like that. I'm still, as I'm navigating through the world, it's still a creative life. And so you're doing what is possible, not only to preserve life, but to preserve the grace. If the grace is lost, then I would say, then I meet my father there when he stopped eating then. So then I can see where the body, where the person in the body may surrender before the body, that the body may take 5 years or 3 years or 2 years or 2 months. But if the person somehow surrenders without it being an erotic experience, and as far as I can detect at the time when I saw my father, he was smiling and we asked, do you need any help? And he liked to see that his grandchild was there. But basically, it seemed so easy for him. what do you do? He said, you stop eating, you know. And I said, okay. I had to research that a little bit to find out. And I found out that in some of the doulas, the death doulas, and that's meaning what Urja would say, even though you got a certificate, a graduate from being a death doula, don't you? So she is officially a death doula. So that means that if you want her to come and visit while you're dying or something is happening, or there's a recognition, we'll say that dying is happening. So then you still have, I think with Urja, are you going to do palm readings with that? No. So I think it's hanging out. And yet it's hanging out in a space that everybody would fear talking about or looking the other way or would force you to live longer or whatever. And you see in the conversations that you share that you're kind of touching on the human element in the story. And then it's when you awaken it, it's kind of the human element that's speaking, not fear, not this or that. But I feel that when the life is extended out of grace, it's different than it is out of fear. The grace is not, I think that there's a cooperation when it's out of grace. Let's say as long as someone says, hey baby, and feels for you, then I can act like an old guy, I can do all this shit and everything like that. You understand? So let's say that the body is fluid to some degree. And even Urja's challenges with what's happening and some of the things that she has to take, she still could do this backbending kind of Pilates shit and background. Her daughter's going to come in. They're both going to do this, So even though she may be a geezer on the way out, somehow she's doing Pilates on the way out and having a good time. How the hell did you pull that off? What philosophy do you have, Urja, that you're having a good time while you're an old geezer? Why should I be having a good time as an old geezer? I should be cranky.
It's weird. It's the most precious time ever.
So let's say that somehow I visited the body when I was 14. I visited the body when I was 26. I visited the body when I was 30-something. I visited the body when I was 50. I'm visiting the body. It's like I'm looking out the window of a skyscraper. I still feel me.
Yeah.
And I still feel that my body can do a lot if you asked it to, but I'm not asking to do that much, But I also kind of, with the club exercise and other exercises, it's very flexible. But still, you got the club. How much does it weigh?
The light one.
How much does it weigh?
1 pound each. I wanted more for the movement, giving some weight to the movement.
No, that should be good.
Yes.
No, I'm doing a lot with it. How are you? Are you still doing it, Derek?
Yep. Yeah.
The
Most
club
mornings.
exercises, yeah.
Yeah.
But now, as I say, what I did when I accidentally saw the shadow, as kids, we used to go to the gym. Was not the gym like they have now. It was more boxing for kids. That was considered exercise. And one part of it that I fell in love with was shadow boxing, where you boxed with your shadow and you try to sneak up on your shadow and your shadow caught you but it was a remarkable thing, the shadow boxing, where you had a whole fight with the shadow. And then I saw that in the club with the shadow, and it then started to, like you were having a conversation with the shadow in some of the movements. And then as I did it in front of the glass doors, and there he took some photos of that, I'm starting to explore it more as a way of a kind of fitness, although I'm doing other things, but not, that still is, when I get up early in the morning, then I'm going out and I'm doing the exercise with the eyes and the hearing and the smelling. And I'm doing that by lining up sounds in the sky, because they have hidden planes here, I guess from the Air Force or something out here. So they do exercise, military exercise. So the planes, my experience of planes is that they're doing at least 1,000 miles, 900 miles an hour or so from the sound I hear. because in the Navy, I learned the sounds of how fast something is going, because it breaks the sound barrier. So the different sounds will tell you how high up the plane is or so on, like that. And then it'll also tell you how fast it's traveling from the sound. It has to be over 600 miles to get that crunch sound in the air. So I'm kind of doing an exercise where I'm locating the sound in the sky or here or there, or, you know, but I'm just doing this kind of relaxed exercise for the senses. And as I'm doing that, the sense of, as I say, dreaming, that's why I all of a sudden discover a kind of book that I've been doing anyway. And the breath book is a kind of discovering of a book that I've been doing anyway, but it just adds a kind of scientific basis to it or another perspective to it. But I do feel that the exploration of one's life, when it becomes an exploration, not just a survival, but an exploration, I think that virtual reality is one aspect of it. The exploration of a virtual reality where you start to see that your reality is virtual. Now you can see that we're talking about in a relationship that's breaking up and continuing at the same time. You can see a virtual reality in real time, that one is in a virtual reality. And if one looks at the virtual reality, you can see, and then I guess if in fact you see it from the perspective of virtual reality, you can see the current events from the perspective of, and you see, no, that's not Afghanistan. That is a bunch of people making decisions that's kind of laid on this Afghanistan. So then we think it's normal. But then as you look into it, you see for years people made money off of it and this was happening. It really didn't care about that. It became a thing. So when you look at it, you start to see the issues are not really the literal issues. But you see, then you do see conspiracy. You see, for 20 years, it was a conspiracy to continue something because some people were doing really great with it, maintaining a status quo. And so when you start walking into the world of literal, you start to see schemes that break your heart. Because in order to do that scam, they had to make sure that maybe 500,000 people would pass away. And if 500,000 people, that would mean families that would be affected for a long time. So let's say if you make a buck is causing this dislocation of humanity, there's a moment waiting for you where you'll be ashamed of yourself. That being ashamed of yourself will return you to a human experience. You see, so then when we talk about the conspiracy theories, we're talking about a suppression of the human towards a goal. And so you could see it can come out easy enough when you say, look, in order to win this war, we have to drop this bomb on this population. So then you say, hey, how you doing? What's your latest? You're still painting or drawing?
I made a DIY squishy. I painted a squishy. I can go get it.
Okay, that sounds pretty good.
I'll be right back.
Okay.
She said,
You know, for a couple of days I was figuring things to show, and then I forgot. But I was saying, you know, let me get this painting, let me get this picture. This is doing. I did show you that one about the birds, though, didn't I? With the dripping birds.
I don't remember.
That would be interesting to experiment. I'll show you here.
how old is she now?
9. She had a birthday party this weekend.
She's so
We had 7 girls in a hotel room.
Oh, wow.
It was,
Evidently something.
yeah.
Oh, yes, the birds.
Well, he just passed away, the fellow who made it for me maybe 50 years ago.
Oh,
I like it, this one.
Here it is.
Oh,
This is my squishy.
oh,
Yeah.
nice.
Wow.
It's just,
You need to be really careful with it. Right now, like the paint is already tearing because I haven't gotten a varnish on it.
Yeah. Are you working with anyone or just doing it on your own?
on my
Huh?
own.
Pretty good, yeah.
Mushrooms?
Yeah, I won't show you this. I'll show you.
I'm gonna stop playing
What's
with that.
What is
paint.
that
I
stuff?
don't care. I need to get a varnish on that.
What is that stuff? It seems that it's soft.
Hmm?
The material of what she showed us. What is it? It's rubber? It's
Foam. It's
not
foam.
clay.
Let's
I
see.
thought it was clay at first.
Did I show you this before? This is, you see that cup? and
Oh, that's
saucer?
pretty.
That's made out of beads.
Oh, that's pretty.
And she signed her name, Lisa Lou. Her name is
Hmm.
Lisa Lou. And then she made a whole kitchen out of beads. You could
Oh,
look her
wow.
up. Her name is Lisa Lou. Look her up. But she uses beads and she makes all kinds of work. But this is very, out in the world, this is very expensive because she's a big artist. But it's just a cup and a saucer made out of beads.
It's really pretty.
What?
Lisa Lou, look it up. You'll flip over some of her work. And they were just a bunch of kids in New York just putting stuff together like that, you know. But she's become very popular, so that's pretty nice. what you create. Hmm?
How she do that?
How does she
Buddy
do
did
it?
she did some really pretty artwork on my arm last weekend. They were doing henna.
Get your phone.
No.
Oh, that's
Do
pretty
you
nice.
want me to try and find it?
It was this Saturday, so it shouldn't be that deep in photos.
Okay. I'll try.
Oh, did everyone else go?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm.
So I guess the folks that are calling in, Kai, are just touching base then.
I'm the main photo.
What? The what?
Well, the people who are listening in have been pretty consistent then, the same three
fuck
or
your
four
phone.
folks.
It'll make
I
it.
can't. It's hard to see. Oh yeah, there's light. It's reflecting on
Well,
the.
that's pretty nice. Oh, boy.
Can't really see the detail.
That's
Yeah, I
pretty
can't.
good.
She has a book of design.
What?
She has design in a book.
I see. Look at my arm. Can you see that shamrock?
Oh, you know, she asked about that. She asked if you could get rid of a tattoo once you got one. Danny kind of
No,
got
I've
rid
got,
of.
this one was Popeye, but it faded away. Then I have Cupid over here. This is Cupid.
Popeye?
This one is Popeye.
Didn't you get one of them partially removed or something?
I got them when I was about 14. Yeah, I think
Is
so.
that a
I got them
Popeye
when
tattoo?
then I have my name written here when I was around 13.
Oh
I
boy,
think that this one,
that's really young.
you know,
He has
Cupid looks like a little
Popeye
orphan Annie.
tattoo.
But Popeye because I joined the Navy. So then I put
Oh,
the sailorman. And then
oh boy.
this is supposed to be a 4-leaf clover, but
Yeah.
I didn't have the extra 25 cents. So he made it a 3-leaf clover. It was supposed to be a 4-leaf clover.
Oh my
25
gosh.
cents. And I says, can't you do it, please? And he says, no, you got to give me 25 cents. So I didn't have it. So this is how dopey we are. Are you going to get a real tattoo? Are you going to get any real tattoos? I mean, they
Who,
say
Me or Lotus?
they're probably best to put on every now and then, make some really beautiful ones and then replace them and stuff like that. Isn't that better?
Yeah. Yeah. I got rid of, I mean, I have 2, but I'm done.
You have 2 left?
I have 2 that I got in my 20s, but I don't want any more.
Did you have them removed?
What?
Did you ever try having them removed?
No, I'm not gonna do that, but I definitely don't want any more.
Yeah, I remember they trying to have them removed, but the one of them, Popeye is pretty gone. Sorry, Popeye. I'm sorry, we try to remove poor Popeye. I'm sorry, Popeye. Popeye just yelling at me now. Okay,
Matt,
I was only, I think, 16 when I got Popeye
Wow.
in Coney
Did your
Island.
mom let you do that or did she not have it?
No, I had to hide it from my father saw the one that I had on, I was helping my father do something. He saw one on my arm. But it was
Oh,
okay. He didn't get too pissed off. But did my mother, boy, I wouldn't have shown my mother the tattoos until later on. My mommy. Now, what was that sound you just made? Yeah, what was that? What is jamming? Yeah, you want to go already, you mean? What's the next sound? Did you learn sign language yet? Did you learn sign language yet? No, that's dancing. That's pretty nice. Should we call it a
And
day?
make script to the other side.
Okay, ready? We're gonna go make pancakes.
Okay.
I made a
Bye.
bye. I made a very long trip.
You know,
to
we
the
had
other
corn
side.
pancakes today. Really
Mm.
nice corn
sounds good.
pancakes that Janet makes.
Oh, the
It was
best.
really great.
Sounds
Yeah, the
good.
best.
We're gonna use our new egg replacer.
Okay. I'll see you next week.
Okay, thank you,
Thanks,
Dave.
Danny.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Good luck.
Bye.
Bye-bye and good luck. I'll catch you later.
Oh my goodness.